person will come the first negative construct within 8 minutes.
Before starting my speech, I will share my roadmap. Counter plan 1, counter plan 2, disadvantage, negation. I repeat it again. Counter plan 1, counter plan 2, disadvantage, negation. エビデンス読み終わったらこうしてほしいです。お願いします。This was Amiai. Then I will start now. Counter plan 1, ASAP point observation. 1. Under status quo, there are two kinds of interpretation for the Japanese voting system. The first one is if only rights, and the second one is both rights and duty, which is called dualism. 2. However, the Supreme Court does not clarify which interpretation is actually correct. Actually, their past judgment can also be interpreted as both of them. Please look at evidence number CP1, underlined sentences. Three, if dualism was the correct interpretation of today's constitution, then we can say compulsory voting has already been introduced with the constitution. If so, what we have to do is not introduce compulsory voting, but make additional rule or law to make the duty aspect function more. 4. Therefore, as long as we cannot know whether compulsory voting is already introduced or not, we cannot start discussing whether affirmative plan is desirable or not. Visa point mandate 1. Shall ask the Supreme Court which interpretation is correct for the current voting system, only rights or dualism. 2. Necessary adjustment. CISA point 1. CISA point 1. Non-topicality is clear, because we never take the action of compulsory voting introduction. 2. The competitiveness is mutual exclusive, because as long as we cannot know whether compulsory voting is already existing or not, we cannot know whether affirmative plan can be taken or not. Visa point solvency. 1. First superiority is if dualism is the correct interpretation for today's constitution, we can cut the time and cost of some action included in the affirmative plan, such as amending the constitution. Moreover, we can use the time and cost to make additional laws or systems to make the duty more effective. 2. Second superiority is that by knowing the actual interpretation for the current voting system, we can start debating whether affirmative plan is desirable or not. Then go to counter plan 2, counter plan 2. Counter plan 2, ASAP point observation. 1. Non-article plus plural noun means all. Please look at evidence number T17, underline sentence. Therefore, today's resolution can be interpreted as Japan should introduce compulsory voting in all national elections. 3. There is a kind of national election, so-called re-election, which is held when the vote number which candidates receive is so small. Please look at evidence number CP3, TP3, underline sentences. Visa point mandate 1 shall introduce compulsory voting in national elections except re-election. 2. Necessary adjustment. C subpoint 1. Non-topicality is clear because we don't introduce compulsory voting in all national elections. 2. Competitiveness is mutually exclusive. D subpoint solvency and superiority. 1. Same solvency because we will introduce compulsory voting in the normal national elections, which affirmative imagine. Even if we don't introduce compulsory voting in re-election, affirmative impact won't happen because almost all politicians are chosen under high voting rates, and only 1 or 2 of them in a few elections are elected with voluntary voting. 2. First superiority is that we can lower the burden of citizens to go to the election again. 3. Second superiority is the prevention of random voting. As for re-election, uniquely random vote is likely to occur because most people have already chosen the candidates they wanted to choose. So many people are not interested with that election anymore. Therefore, uniquely re-election, it should be done with really interested citizens by voluntary voting. Then go to disadvantage. Disadvantage is upon uniqueness. 1. Under status quo, thanks to voluntary voting, people show their will and opinions by not only usual vote, but also abstention or blank vote without pressure. 2. For example, they can rely on others to make political decisions by abstention. Then, they use the time for something more important for them, like walking, family time, rather nothing to do, and so on. This is just a comparison of each individual, in which no one should intervene, but only should respect. Visa point linkage. 1. Fast linkage. After plan, people are forced to go voting. This deprives them of happiness physically and mentally. Physically, they must spend their time and money for transportation, collecting political information, and so on. And mentally, they have to imagine those burdens and become nervous. 2. Second linkage. However, there is no proof that outstanding change or results occur for governments, policies, and our daily life for all people in Japan. C subpoint impact. 1. First impact. Citizen dissatisfaction occurs just by introduction. Therefore, 100% happiness is violated by 100% possibility. 2. Second impact. Citizens disappointed for no visible change or revolution by their enforced board. Rather, they think their votes or effort is meaningless. Then people start voting without paying the cost for collecting information or thinking deeply. 3. Decision rule. Affirmative must show absolute advantage to overturn their vote concern. Why we have to involve all people, even though after the election, no clear answer or return for all individuals is delivered. Otherwise, all affirmative proposal is not for happiness for all people, but must be for specific people, which is totally same as affirmative mentioned in their inherency. So, your plan is, at most, just shifting unhappiness from people in inherency to people in uniqueness. Then go to negation. Negation makes up point of equality. 1. National elections means elections owned or controlled by the government.
Time. Close examination time for the affirmative side.
Sure.
For counterbalance, indeed, the question point is that under the status quo, a Supreme Court doesn't know that Supreme Court take the stance of the juristic stance or something. So maybe there is a possibility that compulsory voting is already introduced, so affirmative plan cannot be taken or something.
To some extent, like what we are trying to say is that because under status quo, two kinds of interpretation exist, like only right and both right and duty. So that like in order to start the debate, it is important to guarantee it.
Then, or you can say compulsory voting is already introduced simply because there is an interpretation of yours there is no something.
That's
Why you
because
can-
dualism is the idea of there is the right and duty.
Why you can say that can be said as a compulsory voting?
And that's because compulsory voting is the way of make duty for the citizen, right? So that at that time, because there is a both right and duty.
Okay. So please maybe on to counter one two.
Yes.
Maybe your counter one two is that shall introduce compulsory voting except re-election. And there is two separately, that is to decrease the burden of citizens and to prevent random voting in re-election. Then please move on to DA. Okay, as for DA, you're saying that in after plan, citizen happiness is defined by their duty or enforced law, physically and mentally.
Yeah.
Well, and negative has to, affirmative has to show the absolute advantage to overturn the concern or something. However, why you can say that people's voting dissatisfaction can be leads to such cost cuts random voting or something.
And that's because people cannot get a visible change.
Why
Even
people cannot get visible change? Their dissatisfaction will occur.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
Why people's dissatisfaction occur if there is no visible change or something?
Because when they go to the voting, there is a necessity to take a time to collect political information, or to go to the polling site, all those kind of things. So even though they take the time and cost for the election, because there is no visible change, so that like people feel dissatisfaction. That's because they use the time, so that like the reflecting some good points is important.
So what you want to say is that in increasing after plan, people's burden is increased. So there is the policies has to be changed as it can satisfy people. The change must be something that can satisfy people.
So introducing compulsory voting itself cannot be the visible change for the people. That's because it's just the way of the election, right? So at that time, even though we take the compulsory voting, we are not sure visible change will happen or not. So at that time, there is a possibility of no visible change for the people. So then people feel the dissatisfaction physically and mentally. And then the people's happiness will decrease.
So I guess our stance is if we have to introduce compulsory voting, there is affirmative has to show the visible change. Thank you.
Session time for the affirmative side.